What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Representing the Resin. My name's Jameson Wellborn, and today we are joined by my good friend Connor, aka Terpwizard. Connor, thank you so much for taking the time, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate you letting me be a guest.
Absolutely, man. We actually first connected, I think, about a year ago through our mutual friends, Adam and Hannah of Mission O Melts. And it's been like, I've been following you, and it's been really cool to see the amount of things that you've been able to accomplish in such a short time and the notoriety that has kind of come with it. And I definitely want to dive into that and talk about, all your recent successes. But before we do that, as always on the show, we like to start at the beginning. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, where you're from and where you grew up?
I grew up in a northwest suburb. Well, they refer to it as a Chicagoland. So like an hour outside the city, northwest, in Crystal Lake, Illinois, and moved out of there when I was 19 to go to school in Colorado, and hung around Colorado for 4 years.
What was growing up in Chicagoland like? Like, was it, were you in a rural setting? Were you more urban? What was that like?
So we grew up in, I grew up in a kind of a smaller town, and there was a fair amount of farming. But we had like a nice little downtown. It wasn't completely, like a rural area. Some were kind of in the middle. We were kind of lucky with our proximity to Chicago. We always had really good flour out there. I moved out before hash was really a thing, or, I wasn't really connected as a high schooler to great hash or anything. So that part of my life didn't really happen until I moved out to Colorado.
What was high school like for you? Like, did you have your head in a book? Were you a dreamer? Were you active in sports?
Academics weren't really my thing. I was more on the side of liking art and more of the time outside of school than in, which is that's what I was into. And then for sports wise, I did a little bit of lacrosse, I think for 2 years, and we were kind of more like the Bad News Bears. Like, we weren't a good team. We just kind of were just like the team that was known for fighting, and that's what I liked about it. So for me, it was a great way to get out aggression, and I was more into the fighting side than being a good team member or yeah.
So growing up in that semi-rural setting, like with a lot of farming going on around you, were you drawn to that as a kid, or did you kind of push that away in teenage rebellion?
My dad was a businessman, and my mom was a hairstylist, so we didn't really have any direct connections to farming. We would see it driving around town. There was definitely large corn farms around and stuff, but nothing really inspiring. That part of my life didn't really come until college and later in life, maybe around like 19, 20, somewhere in that age.
So before we jump ahead to college, when did you first become aware of cannabis? Like, was it a young age, or did it happen later in adolescence?
Well, I think, I was aware of it because like the DARE program at first. And then I want to say my freshman year of high school, my buddy had me over, and he had this triple bubbler and a steamroller, and he stole some flour from his dad's room. And then after his dad fell asleep, we smoked in his house. He was kind of like, I don't know, lack of a better term, like the bad kid. He got to do whatever he wanted. There was no one really checking on him, so he get to stay out as late as he wanted, do whatever he wanted. He was kind of like the party house. Maybe grew up a little bit faster than the rest of us, but yeah. So I think he had he introduced a lot of people in our friend group to ganja, and then maybe some other things down the line. But
what was that experience like for you? Did you get high your first time? Was it memorable? Was it something you can't, barely remember back to, or what was that like?
Yeah, so there's a couple things I remember about the night. Um, I remember the color of the flower was interesting because I was used to like seeing green bud and stuff like from all the pictures or like before smoking it, but he had like some red, like more of like magenta, like a very beautiful looking flower. Like whatever his dad had, he stole like some decent stuff for the time. Um, and yeah, I definitely got high, and the guys who I was with too did as well. And one of my buddies was like, "Ah, I'm afraid to get too high because I got to go skiing the next day." I was like, "What does that have to do with it, man? Like, I don't know how that's gonna affect you negatively." So he only took a couple hits and maybe finished the whole bowl, which is like a big thing at the time. I was like, "Oh man, you got me too high because you wouldn't help me finish the bowl." But no, it was great. Kind of helped get the ball rolling. Like I started smoking, at the beginning of the week, and by the end of the week, I was selling it because I was like, "Oh, I love it so much. I want to figure out a way to essentially smoke for free." So that was, what I came up with. Buy larger amounts, sell most of it, and keep a little bit so you can smoke for free and whatnot.
I think that's how a lot of us started. So
Yeah.
was it named at that time? Like what were you getting? What did you have access to?
When I was living at home, we really didn't have names. Or at least by the time it made it to me, there wasn't a name. It was kind of just like, this is what I got. If you want it, that's it. I don't believe there was medical even at the time when I was living out there. I think that was pre that, or maybe like right when I left it happened, but it was for pretty sick people. I don't recall that we had figured out like how to get your card. Many years after I left, people had figured that out. Like, oh, you can just like go in and go to this doctor, say this, and then you can get it with not being on your deathbed or having something seriously wrong with you.
Yeah. So what was your headspace like coming out of high school? Like were you stoked to head to university? Did you know what you wanted to do? Where were we at?
So I knew that I wanted to do something with ganja because, like, in high school, I was watching as much stuff as I could on YouTube. Like, there's a lot of high time stuff, like the early cannabis cups, like maybe some Amsterdam stuff, and like some older videos from that time period. And there was also the like strain hunters stuff. So I was like kind of more looking at the Dutch scene. I think there's maybe even a couple like videos of dispensaries in California. So I was like, oh, this is cool. I need to move to a place that's medical. So going to Colorado, kind of had that in mind. Like, all right, I got in trouble when I was a kid, and was on probation for this later half of high school, and I took it pretty serious because I didn't want to like remain in the system. So I didn't smoke for maybe, for sure all my junior year and most of my senior year. So once I got out of the house, I was like, I'm not gonna even fuck around. Like I'm gonna get this card so I can not have to worry about the law and like, enjoy how I like to relax and not have to worry about it. And so I already kind of had that idea of moving to Colorado, and coming out of high school, I had a really terrible GPA. I like I said earlier, I didn't take it serious. So when I got to community college, I took it a lot more serious. I found it being able to make my schedule and go when I want, only be there for a few hours a day, and having a motivation like, oh, this is my last chance to get out of my town. So, graduated or left community college with a much higher GPA than I did leaving high school, and was able to go to CU Boulder. Um, didn't exactly enjoy my school experience there. Um, I went from doing like a business management degree at community college, and that was fun. I liked learning about business and like just like the basics, and then going into an economics degree in Boulder kind of changed things, and that really wasn't for me. So
What about that wasn't for you, Connor?
it didn't. I didn't really have any passion behind it. Like learning about business at community college was really fun for me. I liked everything because like it was all applicable. Like this is real world skills, like how you start a business, how you managed finance. It was all like the 101 classes, so it was nothing like too deep, kind of just like surface level, just like good stuff to learn coming out of high school. I'm like, this is how you can set up a business, like just that kind of stuff. So it felt all practical knowledge. Where when I got into economics, it didn't. I don't know. It just didn't resonate with me. I didn't dig it in the same way.
So what was your move?
So I was scared as hell to tell my parents, like call them, like I, go in this nice school, worked my ass off to get here. I was like, I think I want to do culinary school. I like cooking. I was really into cooking when I moved out, and I found this program in Boulder, so I didn't have to leave. French culinary school is 10-month program. You kind of go there, same as like a work schedule, like your 9 to 5, and then you kind of spend 8 months in school, 5 days a week, 9 to 5, doing cooking and learn the basics all the way to, how to work in a restaurant in a line in like a nice French restaurant and understand like the brigade system. And then the later half of the program, you spent 2 months on a farm, where that's where I kind of like discovered my love for small scale farming. And then the last month was a stage, or what's the other word for that?
Like a co-op or a work program?
Um, drawing a blank on it. But so like I had to work at a place for a few months in
Yeah.
order to show that. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me ask you about the first part of that. Like, I mean, how did your parents take that, first of all? How was that conversation handled?
I was more nervous and worked up about it than they were. They just wanted to see me happy, which is great. It's good to have a support system like that. So they were just stoked that I, had a plan, was going towards something, and not just like giving up and be like, I'm just going to not do anything and figure it out as I go. So they were at least, supportive of that, and, made me feel a lot better about leaving school for a finance degree to go to something that probably won't, financially make as much, but at least, I'd be happy doing it, where I think I'd be completely miserable trying to navigate being like a stockbroker or something like that.
Absolutely. So let me ask you, how were those first 8 weeks? You're in the kitchen, was it what you expected?
Yeah, it was great. I think I got really lucky and got in a group with a bunch of really fun people. And I don't think we were the earliest class. We were kind of like, maybe I think we started at like 10 or 11. So we had some people that weren't like necessarily the early risers. So I don't know. I just got lucky and got a really good group of folks. I spent a lot of time outside of class with these people cooking. So eventually moved right across the street into a apartment. So like what would happen is school would wrap up and then it'd be dinner time, and we would all come to my house, and one of the other classmates I moved in smoke and then cook some more. So like there's 8 culinary students going. We were thrown down. We were like making the pasta, making the stuffing, making the sauce. It was like gourmet shit every single time. It was like a great experience, especially smoking and be like, what are we gonna make now? Everyone's a good cook. There's no question.
That would be very cool.
Yeah.
So where did it progress from there? Like you finished that 8 weeks and then you headed off to the farm?
Yeah. So there was a couple farms we worked at. There was this one little farm in Boulder, and we were there during the colder months, so there wasn't a lot of stuff growing. But this lady was doing like a bunch of prep work on her farm. We helped her set up an aquaponics system. We got to see her indoor aquaponics, where she would grow um, a couple herbs and stuff, nothing too big, and was kind of testing it out at home and then seeing on scale. And we were setting up this plot to do some lettuce. So that was really cool to see. And I eventually got a CSA membership through her, so I'd pick up vegetables for a year after from her. I continued to live in Boulder and then eventually moved closer to Denver, and it was just really fun to see her being self-employed, doing what she loved, got to, you know, work with a bunch of nice farms in the area, and then, giving back to the school. And, she would teach them and then get free labor back and have all these students help her build her projects. So it was a great exchange, I'm sure, on both sides. Oh, you're muted.
Was there a moment that you were working there that you made a realization that this might be something that you want to spend more time doing?
I think there was really nothing that I didn't like there. Like, hang all right, that's not true. We had to do a chicken harvest day, and that was a little brutal. I'm not a hunter or anything. I've never like intentionally killed an animal to eat it, which at some point I would maybe like to do that with deer, but at that current moment in my life, I wasn't quite ready for that. And it was it was definitely eye opening to see the whole process, because like we had worked 8 months in the school, all this stuff. We didn't really get any whole animals with the gut still inside, so everything came pretty much like take the skin off. The chicken already came pretty much good to go. It was only the fish that we had to like fillet. So it was you know, pretty eye opening to do that whole process. We
Absolutely.
did get a whole pig once, but it once again didn't have its inside, so we got to break that down. So I don't think I'll be harvesting meat anytime on our property, but at least there's outlets here where I can take it to do it if we ever decide to go that route.
There you go. It's
Yeah,
good to know how to do it.
definitely.
So after you spent some time on that farm, what was next? You went for a work term, or a how did that work?
I remember the word I was looking for, internship.
Internship.
So
There you go.
I want to say I was like 20, just about to turn 21 when I came out. So the way that the system worked at that time, you couldn't work in the industry and the ganja legal side of the industry in Colorado. So I got a internship initially at a bakery. I got one day in. I don't know how, but somehow they didn't check my age until the first day, and I was talking to people, and then I was like, "Oh, my age came out, so I was 20." So I got fired the next day, and then ended up working at a bakery. And the first week or so was good. Coming in pretty early, 6 a.m. So kind of fucks with your social life if you're having to go to work at 6 a.m. You're probably waking up at 5 or 4, depending on how long your drive is. And then I think we got into week 2 or 3, and they kept trying to get me in earlier and earlier. And because I was the new guy and lowest on the totem pole, they're like, "Oh yeah, you come in and start the bread, start all the stuff." And I just wasn't really into that. So I had to figure out a new internship, and I found this spot in Denver that was an edible company. So I turned 21, you know, in that time period, and was able to work there and ended up working there for a year and a half. And the one of the coworkers I had was already growing at um, his spot, and eventually transitioned in the grower at work because the person left. So when I got a house, we ended up partnering up. He moved in there, and that was the first person I teamed up with to grow. That was a really great experience. We worked together until I left Colorado, and I still talk to the guy here and there. Still growing for a bigger operation in Colorado.
What that look
Crushing it.
like? Were you running LEDs, or were you still running high pressure sodiums?
Double-ended,
Yeah.
high pressure sodiums. We converted one of the bays in the garage to, I think, an 8 lighter. So nothing, for some people that's big. It's compared to work. It was small. It was manageable. Between two people, that's pretty manageable. Um, and then eventually, got my basement built out and finished up. So we added a couple tents down there. And then my other roommate, I split that with him. So it would give me, we did like a 2 week on, 2 week off. So every 2 weeks I could like go do whatever. So I was renting out my house, collecting rent from them, growing in it, and then every 2 weeks I could go up to the mountains, go home, do whatever. So it was a really lax schedule and a great way to kind of transition. So after, renting out my house for a couple months and growing, and I eventually left that job at the edible place and just started being full-time grower, and um, weren't really doing extracts at then. I think that came probably a year into growing at the house, like maybe 2016. I think I have some pictures of some really nasty green hash I made with like a drill and a paint mixer. Not anything close to what we're doing now. Maybe it looked like the food grade that we pull at the moment.
Where were you getting your information? Like, I know in the early days you were saying that you were looking around online and absorbing it there. Were you still kind of on those same channels and getting different information from YouTube and different channels like that? And
Well, funny enough, it was from the gentleman who hosts this channel, Bubble Man.
absolutely.
So I watched countless times. I would just watch it over and over and over again and try to like basically memorize the process without doing it. I think I don't know where and if it was before or slightly in the beginning, but I also watched Matt Rise's video. Tried to pick some stuff up on the forums, but back then, I mean, even now, like you can't really trust that stuff. Like people are kind of trolling on there. I don't know if that term was even talked about yet, but there are some people they're just trying to fuck with you. So yeah, it was basically Bubble Man and one Matt Rise video.
So did you start your journey like most with dried material? Is that what you were working with?
Yeah, so at the time, flour was going for a pretty good ticket, and like the one of the guys I worked with had enough connections, so like basically I just grew it, took care of the plants, and it was taken care of where it needed to go afterwards. And then BHO was also kind of still hot and going for a good ticket. So we'd take the trim out there, or like some lower sometimes that we didn't want to trim, and so there wasn't really too much like solventless production. I got like this really shitty t-shirt press that they marketed as a rosin press, and it was way too big. It wasn't like something small. It was like a full-size t-shirt press. We were trying to squish nugs with it, and it wasn't working too great. So I want to say that was like an upgrade from the Walmart hair straightener with the little clamp. So we were doing that stuff too, with just like a couple nugs. Occasionally we'd buy stuff from the dispensary to press those nugs to see how they do. But and in that period too, right when I started, or like a little bit before, yeah, it was before the whole reason I got into doing it is because I tried stuff from the dispensary, and I was like, oh shit, I could do this at home. Like I don't have to worry about blowing up my house. Like I don't have to learn this process that could, potentially backfire and hurt me, or I don't know. I just wasn't really into learning about the BHO process. And so after trying some trichome heavy extract and some different stuff from like all greens, that's what initially got me into wanting to go down this route of making my own hash or smushing nugs, or and
So you're one of the rare individuals who didn't have a foray into BHO and pushing a few cans and exploring that avenue.
I had one experience with it where I sent my material to my friend, and he was like, hey, you want to come over and see how it's done? So I don't know if closed loop was really a thing then, at least in my circle of people who were doing it wasn't. So he had this like mosquito net tent set up, right? So it's like screen door material, and they were in there just like blasting a tube into a tray. And then you take the tray inside and purge it. But that was as far as my experience. It's like this is sketchy. Like we're not in like the woods. This is like surrounded by other houses. He didn't really have a high fence, so it's like anyone with a second story can look in and see what we're doing. It wasn't I don't know. There was so much shit about that process. I was like, this is not. I don't like this. Like, I'm gonna get in trouble with either one way or the next. I was like, I'll just wash hash in my backyard. At least my neighbors will think I'm like cleaning something. I don't know. They're not gonna think a bunch of water is like something serious.
That's a good way to think about it. So what happened next? You're cultivating and you're deciding to get into the solventless side. Are you ordering your bags from Fresh Headies, or what was your next step?
No, so I went to the grow store and they had like the bubble magic and the bags and everything. So I just got my first set of bags there and tried to air dry, and like I never had a freeze dryer when I was living in Colorado. Once I moved and got out of that partnership with the guy who I was working with there, that's when I was like, all right, full dedication towards solventless. Like um you know what? The first few years in Michigan, flower price was good, and as it transitioned, I was slowly getting more and more into it. But at least that was like a time when I was like, "All right, we're doing this. I'm not just gonna like take the extra bits that I wasn't, uh, the A grade stuff.
Yeah,
I was at least willing to take that now and put it towards solventless production."
yeah. That was so when you moved to Michigan was the first time that you were like fresh freezing crops, fresh freezing rooms.
Yeah. So there was a few like I was growing plants pretty small at the time and just like doing I think maybe 5 gallons and just loading the room up with it and just kind of doing a couple of plants here and there, trimming most of it and getting it out. But like being like, all right, I really like this plant. I really like this plant. I'm going to wash it and see how it does it. And like at the time, I, BHO was still getting a good ticket. Flower price were still really good. So I couldn't really convince anyone. Plus, I didn't really have like a name. No one knew who I was. I was fresh to the state. I didn't really have like a following. Um, there wasn't really even a ton of people known for it, from my understanding. I mean, there was like the Bugatti extract people who are ice extract. Those folks were knocking out some killer shit. And Michigan made. I know he was doing some really good stuff at the time when I moved. But there wasn't. I think Macho Melts too. He's been doing it a while here, but there wasn't really a ton of people. Like if you go to shows or like Canvas Cups, it was like people trapping turkey bags and like slabs. There wasn't like how you see it now if you go to shows. Like it's a totally different game these days.
Was that discouraging for you, or did you see that as kind of an opportunity to get in on the ground floor?
Um, I didn't even really look at it like that. I was like, I'm gonna do what I like to do, and I think if I'm gonna go 100% with it and try to make it a craft product, it will resonate with people as long as like I'm honest and I keep putting out good shit. I don't think I'll have any issues. I wasn't really thinking about the competition or like the amount of people or anything on that level. It's more or less like, what do I like? What do I want to smoke? And how can I get good stuff to people?
Absolutely. You're part of the Dragonflyers Medicine family. Was that a group, Josh and Kelly, that you've been following for a while through, just Bubble Man's World and things like that? Or was that something that you became more familiar with when you got to Michigan and got involved out there?
Yeah, I didn't know about them until the Regenerative Conference. I think it was 2019 when I want to say that was either their first or second year out here. And so the guys who I was partnering with for a state legal metric grow, they got me into growing, with in soil under LEDs and teas. So they were into Dragonfly Earth Medicine. They used all their products. I was like, all right, cool. So I went there, listened to Josh. I was like, oh my God, these guys are fucking rad. Like they are speaking about the plant and the connection with the soil and stuff on a different level. And I felt like that was like kind of what I was missing, to bring it all together with like my experience at the farm and in culinary school. Like I only grew in cocoa and salts because that's how I was taught. That's what it was easy at the store. Like you could go buy all this shit. It's like you use this, boom, 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 follow the directions. You know, coming from culinary too, like that's kind of how a recipe works. You follow the recipe, and if you execute well, it will go good. Where I feel like growing in soil, or at least it's a little intimidating to switch to that because there's a quite a bit of a curve, especially having it all laid out. Where I feel like depending on how far you want to go into growing in soil, there's a lot of stuff to figure out, like which style of school you want to do. Maybe you want to do like a mixed style. We pick and pull little things, and that's kind of where I'm at now. But I don't. It just took a minute to get there and figure out, where's my starting point. So I started out with Jadam because that's kind of easy, right? You learn the book, kind of lays it out. And then I was starting to pick up that stuff of Korean natural farming, and it's like, okay, cool. Like, only till recently I realized like the son and the father, like K and F is the father, and then the son is Jadam. Like literally, it's not just a saying.
Like
so,
yeah, that's that's funny.
So then I don't know. Once you get that like baseline of like, okay, cool, I can make my own nutrients for my plants.
Yeah.
Then you start seeing like, all right, who are the KNF people? And then I found Chris Trump, learned his videos or like watched his videos, learned a lot of stuff from him. And, kind of then I went down a couple different avenues. There's a few events here in Michigan that talked about Dr. Elaine Ingham, and she's really into building compost and aerobic compost. And I ended up taking her class last year and kind of just going down this trail, right? And learning from all these different people to, Nick Risden and Chandler from Jet House or Wormies have been, kind of my teachers. They've taught me a lot and showed me a lot of things and helped me connect the dots and, you know, told me it, but actually got to show me it too. Cause I'm more of like a visual learner. Like you can tell me something all day and I might not soak it in until like I see it. I'm like, oh shit, we do this, put the plants in next to you, see, oh my God, it's killing it. So it's great to have all those experiences and, seeing Nick's farm and seeing all these other amazing farmers in Michigan and then wanting to be DEM pure since I found out about Josh and Kelly, and then finally moving this property with the intention of getting there. Getting to that point was such uh, a great, amazing achievement for us. We really worked hard for that, and it was awesome to be welcomed into that group. And I've felt, like I joined a family. Everyone who's been in it has been really nice and accepting and very generous to us.
So, by the way, congratulations. That's a huge accomplishment.
Thanks.
For those people who are and will be listening, who maybe don't know about Dragonfly Earth Medicine and the DEM certification, can you talk a little bit about what that entails and the efforts that you had to undergo to achieve that recognition?
Yeah. So, Josh and Kelly put together this certification that is free, and it's more like a family than a group of farmers. Everyone's pretty tight and pretty giving of information and genetics and their time once you've shown the effort that you put in to be a regenerative farmer. And the certification, it comes down to, at the bare minimum, you have to be operating 6 closed loops on your farm for a year. No synthetic nutrients. They have a great list of their tenants on their website.
Can you give an example of a loop? I'm not asking to of course you don't have to list all the but like for the people at home to understand a little bit about what closing loops are and what that's like for you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So closing a loop would be taking something, and I'll give an example because that might be easier than me trying to describe it. So say we're growing ganja, right? We take all of the scraps of the ganja, the leaves, the stems, maybe any of the littles. If you wash hash, the water, the spent flour, and then returning it back to your land and then growing in it next season. So either through compost or directly spreading it. That's closing the loop. So you can do that with a bunch of things. The easiest example is for sure compost, like growing your food. You can apply that to food too. But like cover crop is one. Building hugelcultures, so like taking stuff from the woods and now putting on your soil and amending it and growing in it, and then just keep returning. So that would be an example. I've been asked this question before, and I felt like I've never really had the greatest words of describe or like
I think
giving a definition, but
I think you did a good job. I mean, Josh and Kelly have done an unbelievable thing building this community and being able to educate so many people on regenerative farming practices, and more people need to understand what closing loops are. And I think starting with food and ganja and composting that into the soil and kind of going from there is the right way to look at it. So I think you did a really good job. So yeah, talk to me a little bit more about getting settled in Michigan. Like, how quickly and how welcoming was that community? Like, I know you've done some work with Lime Rising Farms and Nick Risden, processing some material for him. Like, how quickly were you able to get in with that community that existed in Michigan?
So I think it took a couple years to really get my footing, and like, because we'd go to a couple events, more or less the big ones, so not really any of the small community ones. And it was a little bit lonely moving here at first. Like, I moved out here with another guy kind of on a whim. Like, I knew him for a couple months, and he was just kind of sick of Colorado and wanted to go do something else, was in the ganja space. Like, I think he trimmed for us, me and the guy who I was working with in Colorado, on our last run. And he was a fun guy. So I was like, you want to move to Colorado with me, or Michigan? And it was kind of like that, like maybe like 2 months. And then he moved out there and was helping me with the grow. And so I only really had the one friend, and it took a minute because like I'm not a drinker, so I didn't really go out to bars. It is a college town we're at now. So yeah, it took a second, but like after I started going to these more soil based or like community based events compared to vending, that's when I felt like I was starting to make friends and like get in uh the Michigan community. And I feel like in the last couple years too, there's been a real surge of these caregiver events, and I've been getting to know a lot more people, and the same faces are kind of around. So, but yeah, I think, I don't know, 2.5 years, I really started to feel a sense of community. And then the situation with Nick specifically came from someone promising him to wash his stuff and then not following through. And he's like, man, I got all this stuff frozen for this guy. He told me how to do it, and he just ghosted me. And I was like, well, I can give it a go. And I believe that was March of like 2020 or something, I want to say. And it's been a pretty good relationship between us. I consider him a friend, not just you know a colleague, or I don't know how you want to put it, but yeah, it's more than just a business relationship. We talk on the phone a couple times, a few times a month, and I go out to see him every once in a while, and I've been to his baby shower, his birthday, and a couple other things. So
that's very cool, man. It's cool to see that it seems like there's a strong community out there. How do you like, or compare the Michigan framework and experience to what you were experiencing in Colorado in a more mature market over there?
So as far as like the traditional market, like so out here in Michigan, they call it like caregivers. That's what they're referred to. I don't believe that was the term in Colorado. There might have been a term, I can't remember it at this point, but so when I first got there, essentially how the laws were laid out or like how they were enforcing them, um, you could go to a doctor and then pay certain price points and get a certain plant count, and they maxed out at 99. So you could have, let's say, you and your friends get a house and get some chunk of land or get a nice big house or something, and then all you could go get 99 plant counts, right? And then stack them. So you could just blow this spot up, just really crush it if you wanted to. And that was still the medical days. And then once rec rolled in, they started to slowly pull back those numbers and like, okay, now like, all right, you can only have 199 plant count. And that might have been right a little bit before legalization. I'm a little fuzzy how that came came about, but and then they started going further and further down. Like by the time I left, 36 plants or something was the max you could have. And I was like, all right, we're going a little bit more than that. I should probably leave if I want to keep growing like this. Like we're trying to keep moms around, clones, filling up an 8 lighter and the tent in the basement. And so, and then, you know, I saw a family in Chicago. So I wanted to move close to them and still be able to do what I was doing, but also not too close where they could just pop in whenever they want, be able to spend holidays and stuff, but not be like, oh shit, they're here. Like, so, um, yeah, that's how Michigan got picked. I think the specific town I'm at now, I want to say I heard someone in my like choir class in high school be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go check out this school in this town. I was like, that's a cool, interesting name town, and I remembered it. And then I was looking at houses here, I checked out like 3 towns, like the big ones, kind of closer to Indiana's border, so getting closer to Illinois. And yeah, ended up picking this one because moving from the Denver area to out here at the time, and selling my house at that market, it was I was like blown away with what I could get for the price I sold my house for. Like, wow, I can get a lot more land and I can get a house twice the size, and taxes aren't as bad, and be close to my family. So that's kind of how we settled on this town. And then the place we're at now kind of came a little bit later.
That's very cool, man. And that's the place that you got DEM certified.
Correct. Yeah, the place I was at before was like in a suburb, and there was an acre, and they had a lot more stricter rules with what you could do. And we were at like the top of a hill, so growing like ganja outside would have been a little tricky. And I mean, my neighbors there were really nice, and time to time would smell what I'm doing, but I just felt like there was a lot of things leading us to move. It was a turning point in my life. I talked a little bit about this in the hashtag interview I recently did, but I had that partnership that I mentioned a little bit earlier fall through. There was just some differences we had between the person who owned the property and me. So got to a point where I was like, man, either I'm gonna continue down this path and try to go on the legal metric side and take out all these loans from family, friends, and my family. And like the properties we were looking at were just insane price. And I was like, man, I don't think I could do this. Like this is a little bit too scary to do it all by myself and like hire all these people and rely on it. And like I don't want to be pulled farther from the plant and be basically a manager. I'd rather be in the garden every day and have as much control over my garden as possible. So I was like, I'd rather like get a mortgage for a house and take out a loan that way and be able to, at least if I fail here, right? That's on me. Like if I fail on a metric, right? That could be a lot of other stuff because maybe I mismanaged. Sure, it all comes back to me at some point because I'm running it, but like I'm not having my direct hand in everything like I would here. So that's kind of how we found this property and got to this phase or chapter in our life.
Yeah, I think that, a lot of individuals who have tremendous amounts of passion for the plant try and get involved on the legal side and do everything right, but understand that if they have to oversee everything being done right, their time with the plant is next to none. And I think good on you for recognizing that it would head towards that quickly and understanding what you needed to do, because I think a lot of people get really frustrated by trying to push forward and get further and further away from the plant. I wanted to ask you about a little bit about your lab. I've been lucky enough to be able to smoke some of your hash, and it's incredible. I definitely think you're one of the top makers, and look forward to any chance and opportunity I have to get to taste any resin that has come out of Terpwizard's lab. So I want to ask, let's start at the top. What bags do you use? Do you prefer to use a specific brand or company, or are you kind of agnostic and use what's around?
So I started out with ice extract. Unfortunately, kind of the mentality, right, in America is right, like the most expensive must be the most best, like, or the biggest is the best. So we were using those. And I really liked them at the time, and I didn't. They were also at that moment when I was using them was a Michigan-based company, so I loved the idea of supporting a small Michigan-based company. Once we got from the collecting in a 5-gallon set to a 20-gallon, I found out about Rosin Evolution and their whole full mesh, which was, a lot easier to get that water to pass through. So we use Rosin Evolution for our bags. Another reason I really like that company is how affordable the bags are in comparison to other companies. So I'd say we change our bags out the whole set 3 or 4 times a year, just to make sure everything's like staying as clean as possible. Right after outdoor, I for sure change everything. Like after I'm done processing people's stuff for the year, and kind of just every season try to change them out and get fresh pairs in there to just keep everything clean. Because even we clean everything and do our best to keep it clean, but sometimes we take a risk and run something for the first time and it's just gunks some shit up and just gets it gnarly, and it kind of just goes downhill from there. So that's the bags we're using.
Yeah, no, I think that there's a lot of guys that are rocking Rosin Evolutions for that same ability to not have to cringe at swapping a set of bags out and just moving on, because otherwise, you're stopping your whole process and trying to fix a problem, because that problem too is also time sensitive. So it's you can always stick the bag in the freezer and deal with it later, but yeah, that's very cool. So are you when you're trying to pull separate grades, are you running any unique type bag sets? Like, Simple Adam doubles up on a lot of his bags. Is that something that you like to do or have experimented with at all?
I've never done that personally. After seeing him take the W at the Ego Clash, it was making me think about grabbing that second set and trying it. There's clearly something to it, right? I mean, and there's a lot of stuff that comes down to who wins, right? There's no doubt he had fire genetics, everything lined up this year. But I think, if he was in a different placement a different year, a different group of competitors. All those little things add up to who won. So for sure, I'd love to try the double bags. We're gonna give it a go here sometime soon. Um, for a while, I wasn't doing melt. I've only recently started to do that. I just didn't feel confident enough in the process to do it, and I felt like the few times I had, it wasn't really of that high quality and caliber that I've seen and wanted to put out there if and when I got there. So after talking to a few folks, Adam being one of them, and Tom, Humphrey Hashish, and some other folks. I'm trying to think of who else. Specifically, those two, though. They helped me really dial in the process and figure out what I needed to do differently in order to put melt out there. So we run all the bags for the melt, but then when we were doing just rosin, and still now when we just do rosin, we pull more bags out. So like we wash in the 220. I will put a 190 to collect some of the stuff that gets out of the 220, and then a 160 will kind of be the double catch for maybe some crap that falls out of that. And then from the 159 to the 73, we'll pull that for our first wash. And then for the second and third wash, we do second wash is 73, same setup as before, 159. And then the last one, we will put in a 25, a 45, and then the 190. And we combined that third wash, 45, 189, the second wash, 73, what was it, 159. And we have like first wash, these are like A grade, release that by itself, and then we have that full spec from those other two. So that's kind of how we will set up our bags.
And do you find that quality to be consistent through cultivars, or do you see like variability in the consistency of the full spec versus the A grade or the first pull?
Are you talking about you're talking about from strain to strain, a little bit of differences?
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes there's certain strains that will just like the majority of the resin will come in that first wash. Like, I think Schwale, I'm not exactly sure how to say his name, but he talked about the weak neck trait.
Yeah.
So, and just like the general structure of buds, like if you have something that's like a little more airier, you can maybe get more to fall in that first wash than the full spec. But more than not, I find that we get a larger amount in that full spec than the first wash.
Yeah.
But
do you have much experience washing in cubes?
Yeah, we did that for a little bit. I wasn't a huge fan. It didn't, I don't know, maybe I didn't do it right. Cleaning a few extra bags too. If I could just clean one wash bag versus a few cubes, I liked just the one. I think I might give it a try though for the hashtag. I talked to Adam from Mission Hill Melts, and that's what he's liking. So I was considering getting a set just to give it a go, but we tried washing with no wash bag in the hashtag, and that wasn't the greatest experience for us. We had some stuff fall through their grate and kind of clog the tube, and just like made it so then now we had to put the 220 in the collection where we're used to just having all the material in it and not really having a bunch of plant material go through during the collection process. So we use a wash bag now in the hashtag too.
And so is this your first commercial vessel that you've experienced, or I guess an automated vessel that you've had a chance to work with? Have you had an opportunity to work on the Icon or the Access or any?
So I got to see I want to say it was the first Osprey. Ken Wall did a class in Oklahoma with Divine Collective, and they had like either the first or second one of the right off like the press ones, and that was really cool to see and made me really interested in getting one. But I wasn't doing anything really to scale that made sense to get that, and also like the price tag for an Osprey, and then now the Nest is, it's a nice chunk of change. The hashtag is still a good amount of money, but you aren't paying as much as an Osprey or an Icon. Um, and and those things came out at certain different times, right? So if I was ready to do a larger scale before I'd seen the Osprey, your only option was really the Icon. And then the Osprey came. I mean, to my knowledge, there might have been more. That's just from my perception of what the units I was aware of. I mean, you could get a Bubble Magic, one of those. We use those once or twice. I never really dialed in right. I know people have done good work with it. It just I felt a lot better doing it by hand and controlling the variables. But once I'd heard about hashtags a couple months before Moth, but I didn't really see a bunch of companies using it, and like didn't see a lot of information of how it ran. So I was like, all right, well, it's a little more affordable, but I don't know anything about it. And then hearing Kaya got one, I was like, oh man, this guy's been washing by hand for a long time. I'm gonna really look into this, and um, you know, ended up pulling the trigger. We have a 25-gallon vessel and a 50-gallon vessel, and placed the order right before harvest season out here, and that was it was a godsend. Like, really made all the difference for us this year, because last year I was shutting down my garden, was taking in people's stuff to wash, and it was easy, right? Not running the garden, like we just wash all the time. Like, that's my only job. It's not impossible to figure out how to run that schedule, but adding all the garden work on top of that, and then homesteading stuff this year, and then trying to keep up with taking other people's stuff in, was like, I can't imagine how we're going to do this by hand. So that was really great to be able to crank up production, essentially double what we did in a day, and then have it automated so I can go do shit still in my garden and take care of things and not have to worry that I'm going to have to work 18 hours a day every day until harvest season's done. So, yeah, if anyone's considering getting one, I think, it's a great choice. I do not regret it in the least bit. It paid for itself easily.
Absolutely. So when you're working with rosin, are you primarily working with cured rosin, or are you doing fresh press as well?
We haven't released any fresh press. My reason behind that is I like the idea of the person who's getting it at the end is getting something that I know how it's going to be. There's no question. Like, I'm not, like, don't get me wrong. There's people who love fresh press, and there's some people who love, whipping it up after, but it just didn't sit right with me that there's a lot of variables that could happen between here and there. And so that's why we only release a cured product to folks, because that I can control all the variables. Like, at least I know how it's going to be presented to the person.
Absolutely. As far as your preference goes, do you prefer melt over rosin or rosin over melt?
So at the beginning, like Colorado, when I first discovered it, we were like, I didn't really see a lot of rosin, so it was just melt. Then we'd press it into flags. Other than the nugs, we'd press of the cured stuff and dry flour, which it's not that great in compared. During then, it was awesome, right? It was the only thing we had. So, but now looking back, it's like, man, that wasn't too good. Like, I wouldn't want to smoke that today unless it was, I don't know. There'd be a rare circumstance where that would happen. But yeah, so there was a phase, right, beginning melt, moved out here, pretty much all rosin. I loved rosin, and then more recently, now that we've been doing and making melt, I have really fallen in love with it again. Kaya kind of once again he got me into back into it because I was like, nah, I don't really like it. I don't like the cleanup process. I feel like sometimes it's kind of earthy, and that might have just been because of the sources I was getting it from out here. Maybe I was getting like their second grade stuff, or like maybe not their meltiest stuff, maybe some more residual, and then got to try some Akaya stuff. I think it was like the Hama Hama and the pink lemonade. And I was like, what the fuck, dude? He's doing it on another level. Like I'm missing out. Like I don't know what am I smoking on? So yeah, it's been melt these days. I really love it. I'm hoping we get the opportunity next year to go back to Ego Clash and be in the melt category. That would be really cool. I was really stressed out about. I know a lot of people do get stressed out about because you have such a short time to submit your entry, but we were even on an extra crunch because our flight was basically 48 hours after we found out, and all my melt was already jarred up. So I was like, if I have to submit melt, I'm gonna have to ungram all this melt, and it's not gonna be a great process. So we got lucky in that scenario that it was rosin. I already had stuff in the freeze dryer, um, and it was some stuff I was proud of and had worked with it before, so I knew what to expect. But we're still kind of in the developmental stage at this place where we're figuring out what stuff because I'm constantly popping seeds. Like we haven't taken in a single clone other than to put outside to make new strains with. So everything is from seed, and it's been great sometimes, and other times it's like a disaster. Like you try to wash some of this stuff, and it's shouldn't be washed. Should have been dried for flour, but I'm not interested in that really. So it goes in the freezer more than not.
Yeah, on top of the hash making, you've already launched into multiple breeding projects, and you've got, from my understanding, a grape cream cake male that you've isolated and done a lot of work with. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So every year, my methodology, the way I'm approaching making genetics at this point, making strains is I will hunt my male indoors, uh, verify that it's a male, and then put it outdoors. So last season, not this one, but the previous year, I took all my favorite hash plants that I had in my stable, and had a grape cream cake F2 male I really liked, and hit him on all the ladies and made some seeds, and those were all bred outdoors. I've only done projects outdoors because um, that got me further down the DEM certification, but also trying to plan further down the line for how the market could turn. At some point, it might not be viable to grow indoors between the power and the price of things. So if I'm already creating genetics that will be best suited for outdoors and with hash production in mind, that can only benefit me in the long road. And then this season, I selected a blueberry watermelon times melon bread from Kush Kirk, his stock of it, and made a few crosses with some hash plants I liked. There's like two crosses that are probably more geared towards flower. That you could probably find something, but it's just going to take a lot more hunting. And those two are like a cherry melon dog and a pancakes with a Z from Aficionado. Those two crosses are probably going to be pretty hard to find washers in it, just based off what I saw from the selections that we grew from the females indoors, and then the actual female we used to pollinate um, or make seeds with. So, and then this year, what I'm searching through is some sour diesel crosses. So I've got a sour diesel male. I think it's the BX4 from Top Dog, and then as well as the sour diesel times blueberry watermelon. I think it's just blueberry watermelon from Kush Kirk. So something from one of those two will be um, selected. I already have a sour diesel male that's looking good. We're gonna clone it here soon and hope that that's the one. But there's a few more that are gonna get sexed out here in the next probably month, and I'll know for sure by then.
That's awesome. I love all that. I love all the sour diesel and the older school strain cultivars that are kind of coming back into vogue. You know, seeing what won legends and what won ego. It's like, oh man, like, you know, it's really exciting to see some of this older stuff start to come back into the spotlight.
Yeah, I think people really miss some of the good stuff they used to have. Like, markets kind of get flooded with certain things, and people want to try something new. And if you hold on to something that's been good for long enough, it will come back. It's just you're gonna have to maybe wait till there's not too many people holding it and there's a little amount. But yeah, we see that with a bunch of different flavors from time to time, like gelato or runts. I don't know what the flavor of the month is this year, but I'm sure there's something there's too much of, and
Something with a Z on it. Something with a Z.
yeah. There's, I mean, after going to a few of these competitions this year and seeing what the people in California are competing with, it's a lot of Z. I don't know at this point. I've only done two, the Smoking Jacket and Ego Clash, where do I try to fit in with those guys, right, and see if I can find some Z, or should I just go the complete other way and submit some like gas, or at this point we've just done fruity stuff. So I think next year we might do a different approach and just try to go in the complete opposite way we think people are going to do it, and try to really stand out on the flavor profile. Because if you've got 20 dabs of fruit and then someone comes in with some gas, like that's a nice mix up. You could just get kudos on that for being the only one thrown in, as long as it's good, or it's not something
1,000,000%. 1,000,000%. Like, there's strategy to hash competitions the same way that there's strategy to like world championship figure skating, where you're like, oh shit, okay, how is it being judged? Who's judging it? Where's it being judged? What are the actual parameters and setup going to be like? Who's competing? Okay, factor all that in. Okay, and if I have access to like a full palette of flavors, like, oh yeah, no, I'm competing different flavors in different competitions for sure.
Yeah.
So I think people, it's going to be cool. All these different events become kind of take hold, and I love it because it's going to just breed more friendly competition and more ways of understanding and assessing quality, and ultimately, we're going to be able to decide on one or a number of different ways that we as a group, like to compete. But I think seeing all these different ways, and I like the regionalism. I want to keep it regional, where, I was shocked at the amount of cheese and gas that was in Michigan, and Maine had so much gas, it was crazy. So I think it's the regionalism is really cool. But I want to take it back to tech a little bit and ask you about jams. Like, do you work with any heat post process in your experience?
Yeah, so I took that class, Ken Wall's class in Oklahoma. I think it was 2020, and that kind of got me down the path of trying more heat tech and just slowly approaching it more and more, and really getting a feel for it and seeing the different stages of it, and understanding what it can do to different profiles. Like every strain, and sometimes phenotypes will like have their own different way it responds. So we do most of our stuff is heat cure, unless it specifically says cold cure on the jar. It's all heat cure. And I think, some strains it works really great with, and then other ones it does something maybe you're not trying to go for. Like maybe an example of that is if something's fruit forward and gas on the back, sometimes those things can get flipped, and like the gas is now present in the front and the fruit's kind of somewhere in the back. And it's interesting to see that. And then I can always push the consistency to be always a wet batter. Like I've got no question if, I've worked with GMO in the past and maybe I wasn't pushing the cold cure far enough or just the way I was cultivating, but it would like always come out dry. And then once I started doing heat cure, I can always get it wet, or I can push it into those like micro crystal kind of stages, or even as far as jams. And that process has been really cool to figure out and see, like when certain separations or things happen, I can like, all right, cool, I can pull it out now and expect it to be wet batter. I can pull it out like this, and I can it can be maybe a little more viscous and almost be like kind of grainy, almost like what's a good way of describing this? It's like maybe like a wet sand or something like that.
No crystals in the sand or snow. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's super interesting. What did you the Bicket was that cold cured?
Not unless it said it. It was probably heat cured.
That's wild, man. That's crazy.
Gas responds really well to heat cure. Mind you, I'm not really someone who knows all the terpenes and the boiling off points. Like I know what I like, but I'm not really behind. I'm not a huge. We're not always sending stuff to the lab to get tested, so I don't really know. Like, oh, this strain has myrcene and whatever. So I just know that the heat cure process responds really well to gas. Something about the temperatures or the timings that we use doesn't really change the profile too much. It's pretty consistent going in as it comes out.
Interesting.
And what's been fun is when I do the same strain side by side, like we'll have something going into the jar, pull that, swap it out, and then have this one cold cure and this one heat, and then hold them up to someone's nose at a show or something, like, which one do you like more, without telling them. It's more than not been heat cure. And then when I tell them this is cold cure and heat cure and be like, hey, which one do you want to buy? It's funny that people will be like, oh, cold cure, because it's a more sexier term or something. Man, I don't really have a great way of describing it, but when you say heat cure, people like are all poo-pooing it, and then if you just blind test it, like,
is it? Do you have like? Because like for me, it's 1 out of 10, if that are gonna jam up better than they cold cure out. And like, I'm not saying that you don't know what you're talking about. I know you know what you're talking about. So it's so interesting to me, that you must have your temp styled or something where you're able to produce a product. Because my experience is more likely than not, if I can't look at it and you tell me, do you want the jam or the cold cure of it, I'll take the cold cure.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, and next time we run into person, if I've got both jars from the same thing, I'll blind test. You might be able to tell by look. So if you can just smell it and do it by that.
Terp style cheesequake, straight up and down, was one. I had the cold cure, I had the jam, and the jam was 10 out of 10 better than the cold cure. They were both phenomenal. Shout out to Terp style, but that was one where I was able to be like, oh no, the jam is better here. MTS Farms had one that the jam is better, and Canadian Dabs has one for me that the jam is better. But those are like one hand, you know what I mean? There's not a lot.
Yeah, and you got cheesecake one, so that's on the gassier side, right?
Yeah.
I don't know about what the other guys had, but it would be interesting if those are both on the gassy side too, because
they're one definitely gassy and one leaning. I mean, one's more candy, one's much more candy, but yeah, no, that it's interesting. It's just like, I think you having a good understanding of what you're doing and knowing when to stop and take heat off is going to be able to, do a lot better than guys who maybe are just hoping and just putting it on heat and, because I've had some jams personally more often than not where I go, I would, the cold cure. It's interesting. It's just an interesting observation.
Yeah, I'm probably far and there's not too many people doing it that way, which is fine. And I get pretty good reception on what I'm doing,
Oh,
so it's nice that whatever we're doing different than the other folks, it's being received well. I'd love to help those people. I don't know what they're doing in comparison. I mean,
well, I mean, are you giving this tech out, or is this the Terpwizard T Tech
I
proprietary?
don't think I have anything different than what that anyone else. I mean, like 175 to 200, you watch for certain stages. I mean, it's not really easy for me to tell. I'm better at showing, and then after that process is done, we put it on a seed mat for like till the next morning and come back, let it go to room temperature, and then stir it up. It's nothing too crazy. The other part I really love about it is the turnaround time is like a lot more established, right? Like I'm processing for someone, they give me something on the weekend, I can get it back by the next weekend. If it's cold cure, the jar's telling me.
Yeah,
I can't give them a day.
yeah, yeah. What about rosin pens? Like, are you working with those much?
Um, Not a ton, maybe a couple times a year. I did a batch with Nick stuff at the beginning of this year, maybe the tail end of last. And then I actually have some stuff that I'll be filling some carts with probably this weekend or early next week, and that will be, the two batches of the year. I don't really enjoy that process. It's not really too fun. Um, I feel like in general, a lot of the carts and pods have a very similar taste because the decarb process. There's some things we're trying different this round to dial it in and hopefully have it a little more flavorful. But it's not really that fun for me to be filling up pods, and I don't like how they're like single use. Trying to, I know there's a huge demand for them. They sell pretty good when they're around, and from what I see at other vending events, like there's definitely people walking out with 100 cases, and the folks who have it dialed in and have their market are just they move. But yeah, between the single source and just not enjoying the process, I don't really do it too much.
What about resin mixing, Connor? Is that something that you're exploring?
Like making blends.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the beginning of when we started doing this, I didn't really do that. It was kind of just, figure out the data per strain, and then maybe the second round go back. And that's kind of what we're doing now. Occasionally I'll do like a mixed pheno blend and get like, when the first run of black maple, we mixed all the black maples together because I wasn't too thrilled with the plants. And in hindsight, I probably should have kept one because they washed pretty well, and a lot of people like that blend. But it is what it is. Sometimes you get a one-off go, and but yeah, now I'm starting to do a few more. Like both the entries to the competition I did recently were both blends. I picked it was a 4-plant blend for the smoking jacket, and that was 2 motor breath Pams and then 2 blueberry watermelon melon breads. And I was kind of going for this like funky melon candy thing. Didn't quite hit it. It was somewhere in that spectrum, but wasn't quite what I was hoping for based on what I was smelling on the live plants. And then for the Eco Clash, it was Trapaya and a blueberry watermelon melon bread. And that one, I was just kind of going for like, once again, like papaya and like melon candy type of deal. And we hit it a lot closer with that one. But yeah.
Were those blends done like pre-wash, or were you blending the rosin?
So more than that, when we do a blend, it is in the wash. I'll wash the plants together. The resin will be able to marry in the water and then get collected at once. But the Ego Clash, because of how quick it came up, 48 hours to make a decision. Everything was washed separately. We did it post-press, which was the first time I did it, which was really interesting because then I got to do ratios. So we tried everything separately, and then we tried different ratios of things. And I was like, all right, I I didn't even know what jar I had to bring or the amount of the sample. So I just like made a half ounce. I was like 10 grams of Tropaya, 4 grams of blueberry watermelon. And that's it. Like, we knew what the jar probably was going to be based on last year. I was like, I'll figure it out when I get to California. If it's less, it's less. If it's more, my guy's flying out in a few days before the competition, so I can have him bring it. So we got lucky. I brought enough. And, going to that, it was a really great experience. I had like a short list of things I wanted to accomplish. And when we moved to this property, and one was getting DEM certified and the other was going to the Eagle Clash, and those happened within months of each other, I was like, man, my list is complete this year. I need to really fucking come up with some new achievements and figure out where I want to go. So
that's very cool. So that was your first Eagle Clash. What was that experience like for you?
It was really nerve-wracking, man. I had, my stomach was fucked up basically till the day. Like I get, my nerves are in my stomach. That's where I think it happens for a lot of people, me specifically. So I just felt like not too great, like leading up to that event, because of the nerves, like the whole rush process, and then be like, well, this is the best I got. This is what I got in my garden at the moment. Like maybe next year I'll have more selections and like more things in flower that I can pick from and have an idea what time of year that'll be. And it was great to meet some of these people that I've never met before. Making it past that brutal cut in the room. I was downstairs when that happened, and I got word downstairs like, oh, one of the wizards got cut. And I was like, oh no, man.
Yeah.
And then, finding out it was not us because we came out from Michigan. I extended my trip. I flew my guy out like on my dime. Like I paid for him to go out there. I paid for his whole trip out there and let him smoke that really fucking sweet experience as a major thank you for busting ass this year. And I would have just been so fucking bummed that I spent all that money and time when I could have been in my garden harvesting and getting back to it just to get cut before the competition. But no, it was great. I learned a lot of things, right? What to bring next year profile wise. Get the food early. Don't fuck around. That shit sells out. After people get in halfway through that competition, they're hungry. Oh. And I took care of my guy too. Brought him up food, made sure he was good. And
you're the best, bro. Mission Hill took care of me. Whale Oil was there taking care of me. It was so special. That was really cool. It was a really cool event. It was cool to go from Legends to Eagle Clash, and like it was like two really, really, really cool experiences. So I was very blessed to be a part of.
Yeah, no, that was a wild trip too. So we went that same week. Dragonfly Earth Medicine hosted a hive gathering, which is essentially it's opened up to all the people in the collective and friends too. So not just the farmers. So there's some other folks there. And that was such a yin and yang experience, right? Like going to this very heady experience up in Humboldt at Heartwood Sanctuary where Joey Berger grew up, and he was there and got to share some stories from his childhood and how that area transformed. And then, going to that and like also the two markets, right? Like a lot of the DEM farmers who were there were legacy farmers that transitioned to mainly being like legal farmers now, playing in that system and hearing the woes of the market and how hard it's been for them in that process and adjusting to making that thing work, and then going to the Ego Clash and seeing the people who stuck around in the traditional market for the most part. And, they're not talking about the same problems, and the way they're dressing too, like, the maybe more people at the Ego Clash wear their wealth or have their wealth in their pipe or something, but it was just way different, dude. Like, in a cool way to be like, this is a great representation of maybe both sides of cannabis events in California.
Yeah, I think the heady boy culture. You might put a little bit more money into your pipe than the dragonfly hive gathering culture. But,
yeah, for sure. I mean, there was still some cool heady pipes there, like
for sure. I would have loved to gone. I was actually blessed and super thankful. I was invited by Josh and Kelly, and I was just doing the Terp tour with Taylor, so I couldn't make it work, but it looked like such a cool gathering, and I think like that stuff's super important. And I know Josh and Kelly plan to do more of that, and so I'm definitely planning on making one in the future.
yeah, it's a really great time, and my partner Lacey, my fiance, she doesn't really go to a lot of the vending events or anything like kind of on that side of the ganja scene, but she'll go to stuff that's community building and talking about farming, and it's more about um, the processes and doing that. So she went out with me and got to meet the whole Dragonfly Earth Medicine crew, and then for a short amount of time she went to the Ego Clash, and it was funny to hear her perspective on both too, because her not really being in that culture or not really having much to do with it other than
if you weren't just like bathed and born and living inside that small niche of culture that we choose to live in, and you just were dropped into the Eco Clash,
yeah,
you would not. Oh my gosh, that would be a thing to see for sure.
yeah, no, we ended up walking up to the cave or whatever that's called, and then going to the barn, and she's like, I'm gonna go back to the car and I'm gonna take a nap, and you just come get me when you're done. I was like, all right, cool, that works for me. Like, this isn't your thing, and I'm glad you support me, and we don't have to do everything together, but I appreciate how you're here, and you value what I do. And we got to spend a lot of really great time and meet some farmers at the DEM gathering, and see how it is to be a multi-generational farm, and meet people who have been doing it like that, and then seeing some of these kids and seeing how they function as a family. I kind of was, honestly, it was really inspiring for me. It's making me want to have kids now, because there was a, I'm still kind of maybe at a selfish point in my life. I'm like, I don't know if I'm like, I don't know if I want kids, because I like how my life is structured. I don't know if I want to have that responsibility yet to have to make these sacrifices for someone to grow up. But now seeing how those people did it and how they incorporated them into their lifestyle, and it's very inspiring and makes me want to maybe get to that chapter in my life sometime here soon.
That's very cool, man. That's very cool.
We'll see.
I'm gonna have to get out to one of those. I love what Josh and Kelly are doing, and I'm a big fan of Dragonfly. They've got a huge position at Melting of the Heads in New York. They're gonna have their own lounge space, and I'm just super stoked to hang out with them. So it'll be super good. But one thing I meant to ask you earlier was, you have a lot of experience cultivating indoors, and you have a lot of experience cultivating outdoors. What are your observations about the resin indoor versus outdoor?
So I'm still pretty new as far as an outdoor cultivator goes. Like, I really only have 2 seasons behind my belt, right? When I moved here, that was like my first one, and we did a breeding patch. We made seeds. And then this year, ran that too, but did
But you've seen a lot of outdoor. You've worked with a tremendous amount of outdoor material.
Yeah, I think in general, right? This is just, don't take it as law, anyone who's listening. If a plant is washing well indoors, I think it's only gonna be better out. There might be exceptions, but I haven't personally seen that yet. Like the Bicket, for instance, I used to run it in oh, hey, you coming in my garden, and it did great. And then seeing it outdoors in Nick's garden where it was made, and he knows that plant, the resin is just way more durable being under the sun, and he grows full term outdoors. Like it just is a little more resilient. Like I think the head just hardens up a little bit more, and um
But when you say durable more and more resilient, do you ultimately deal with a larger waxy coating when you're looking to pull like melt, for example?
so I hadn't we haven't tried to pull melt from Nick's stuff yet, and I haven't. I only I'm like on coming up will be my third melt drop, right? So we only did it when the weather changed. I didn't really mess around with other people's stuff because they just wanted it to come back as rosin. That's what their market's for. They don't really have to mess with anything too finicky and make sure that the people are getting it the way it's going to the farmer. It's going out to the end person. So um I'd love to try it next year. I know Chase Organitron, he did some melt with Nick stuff, but I don't think we've really talked about that yet and how that was. But um moving forward next year, we won't be taking on as many people. Like I plan on working with Nick again, and there's another farmer out here, Tommy Tricombe, that I will continue to work with, but I just kind of I don't know that people expect a lot, and I'm just kind of over over dealing with other people's bullshit when they're thinking, every once in a while you get someone assuming like, oh, did you take from me or something like that? And it's like, yeah, your GMO hit 7%, and then the new strain you're testing that had no idea if it's wash hit 2, and you think I'm taking from your 2% when I would have, theoretically, right? Why wouldn't I take it from the GMO when it hit 7? I would. It just like I don't know where the logic's at, but there's been
That's
some situations dealing like that. It's like I don't know. I'd rather just work with myself, and if something doesn't wash, I don't have to explain it. I know why it didn't wash. It wasn't meant for that.
yeah, 100%. Um, what are your thoughts on the plant's ability to produce resin? Do you feel as though those GMO yields are where the plant is, at its genetic maximum, or do you feel as though there's more ability within that genetic?
Um, I mean, I've heard from other people they've gotten a little bit higher percentages. I mean, realistically, I've only really heard 8 kind of being the cap,
But
and I don't.
do you feel like that is a true cap, or do you feel as though as a breeder yourself that we can move forward somehow and create an even higher yield than we're already seeing?
That's a great question. I don't know if I really have the best answer for you, if I'm being honest. I think we might find some stuff that gets a little higher, but I feel like at some point there will be a ceiling that the plant is no longer capable of getting past, other than maybe washing it more or throwing more of a spectrum in. Like I don't people who have hit 10%, I don't know if how long they wash it, what color their hash is. Like, did they include the 25? Did they include the 190? Like, where does that
How important do you think that standardization is to the continued evolution of our industry? Like, do you feel like it's just going to be like, oh, well, we're not really comparing apples to apples, but I'm just going to stay in my lane and focus on my stuff? Or do you feel as though we need to come together as an industry and go, we need to figure out how we're gonna measure each other, and so we can be communicating in a more clear messaging?
well, I think it might be the most beneficial thing I could think of, right, is let everyone wash they want to wash, but at least be better about keeping data, right? And then I know on a smaller scale, it's maybe a little easier because there's, you know, maybe more passion and time into it. And on a large scale, you just gotta get through what's in your freezers or whatnot. So maybe like being like, all right, on this wash, this stuff, 73 through 189, I got this much. And I have a buddy back home in Crystal Lake who keeps those that strict of data, like every wash, every micron bag. I'm like, damn, man, you really keep some good data. I don't expect everyone to be like that, but if you're trying to really get true wash numbers, telling what microns you're pulling at, what like as many variables as possible, and that would be a better way than trying to figure out a standard way of doing it. Because I don't know if I think maybe on the legal side it'd be maybe a little bit easier to keep that, but I think on the traditional market it would be harder for everyone to get on board. And not that everyone's truthful on one side versus the other. There's cheaters and liars on both sides. Um, but for some reason, I have a feeling that it would maybe go a little easier on some type of standardization like that on the metric side of things.
What's the biggest hurdle in Michigan for a small craft grower like yourself transitioning into the metric side of things? Like, is it a cash? Is it an access to capital issue? Is it a zoning issue? Is it what's the biggest problem or hurdle that you think that is faced by a craft grower like yourself?
Well, I guess it depends on how big you want to go, right? I think the biggest issue would be the way the legislation's set up for being a caregiver, because they have limits on the amount of flour you have. And that makes it really challenging for someone who's processing to stay within those, because they don't clarify if that's wet or dry. That wasn't even consideration when this came up. It was always about dry weight. So they allow 15 ounces maximum for those 72 plants that you grow to be on you. But then when legalization came, they allowed more lenient stuff, but the caregivers can't play by that. It's like anyone who's a proficient grower with 72 plants will have way more than 15 ounces. The other term for that's the Michigan pound. And you'll very quickly blow that number out of the water, right? If you're just drying a plant, right? If they were to show up and you had a plant that was just harvested, yeah, it's not going to be that weight in 2 weeks. And then are you counting the like there's so many variables. But moving past that, right? If you're trying to go legal from a small guy to bigger, I think yeah, the hardest part at this point would be capital. Why did I say like capital? And because there's now becoming more spots available. If you're willing to maybe not go, like if you're willing to move, you might be able to find it, or you're lucky and there's some place not too far from you. Places that need more tax money are being a lot more lenient to open up spaces in their like industrial areas and farming areas. But at this point, I feel like getting in, there was this post from Blacklist earlier this week and saying that Michigan was one of the states that received the biggest change in prices on the legal side. And there was some company who tracks these numbers. And if I'm recalling right, at the beginning of the year, I would see, advertised 200, 150 for an ounce. And then now I can regularly see $50 ounces. And I'm like, all right, well, I get it. Outdoor just came down, right? But still, right? Like that's an $800 pound. What are they paying for that, even with outdoor? Like a 3, a 2? Are they lucky in getting 4? Because like those shops you're going to want to double their money. So at the minimum, right, they're buying those pounds for 400. And it's like, I just can't see how all those input costs you have, even growing outdoor under the sun and being conscious of, not spending too much, it's going to be pretty fucking tight. And if you're, if you think it's going to stay there, you're in for a sad surprise. You talk to people in California, what they get, it's rough. And then you talk to people in Canada and hear what they get, and it's real fucking grim. So I don't know. We might be in for another awakening. I'm just happy I don't have to play in that market. It gets harder and harder. I know that there's people who have been able to carve out a spot And if you're lucky enough to be fully integrated, you're probably doing well. Or have a grow and then processing and dispensary, you're fine. You're not worried about it. You're getting the top dollar for your stuff. But anyone who's just a grow, you're you're in for a hard ride these next couple years, as the big players are just gonna, continue to operate maybe at a loss or very low margins and just weed out people till the market's them, and then they can jack up the price to whatever they want. But we'll see if how consumers are going to respond to that, right? Because
I mean, it's branding. It's controlling your path to market. It's telling your story and getting consumers associated with you. I mean, it's the reason that I do these shows. It's that if we don't speak up and get the everyday consumer to understand where the actual quality is coming from, then it's just going to go to a shiny metallic brand, and then those farmers are going to get squeezed out, right? Like Purdue Chicken doesn't grow chickens. They lend money to farmers who have dreams of owning their own farms, and then they squeeze those farmers on chicken prices. And the more efficiently the farmer grows, the higher per pound that farmer gets, and they're all competing against each other on a sliding scale. And if we're not careful, that's where this is all going. And so having guys like you who are intelligent and really looked hard and had the access to capital to do and make the attempt into a metric, a legal play, and then made the assessment that that wasn't the right time, I think was a really smart move and speaks volumes. And I think that the brand equity that you're building is going to have tremendous value later on, and as long as you're able to manage it, protect it, and then hopefully leverage it into something that will benefit your family. So that's what I see happening.
yeah, I mean, that side of the market will always be there, right? It's just, when would and will it make sense to go there, and how does that look, and where will the laws be, right? Like when that happens, because I don't really, at this current moment in time, I don't want to leave this property. If I could, I've already talked to the city council and tried to allow them to have a micro business license here, where essentially that would allow me to grow, process, and sell at a storefront here. But we're still a little too close to town, where we're at, that they weren't interested this year. Um, we're in like a transition area where it's 15 minutes from a Costco, but like right down the road, there's vineyards. So like, if we had a couple properties, a block down, right? Well, they might be more willing to listen to that request, but because of where we're at, it wasn't a fit for them this year. So we'll try again next year and keep maybe pushing that idea in their ears. My township hasn't allowed a single dispensary in yet, and I think it comes down to the city council members that are there and how they want their part of town to look. And we already have plenty of dispensaries in the city I live in. It's not like they don't allow anyone, but it's just the specific township I'm in, part of that city, they're not interested in going that path at this moment.
Well, good for you for getting in there and meeting with them and pushing for change. Like, that's the only way it happens, man. And a
Yeah.
sweet boy like yourself, as Hannah would say from Mission Hill, would be absolutely the guy that's going to affect that change. So
yeah, and I went in there not like, I said that I was a farmer at first too, and I dressed the part, right? I came in my overalls, I came in my dirty boots, and like came fresh from digging up something part of the garden. So I was like really trying to play it off like, and be, I'm not lying to them. It's like, I'm a regenerative farmer. I want to own a small like mom and pop business and be able to continue what we've been doing just on a small scale, and not really try to get too big and create something that's craft. And it's pretty nerve-wracking going up there and
absolutely
and talking to those people, because I don't know, they're much older than me, and they're in a political position essentially, and dealing with stuff on another scale. And it was just nice that they were willing to put that on the ballot with only going a few times, and at least humor me and talk about it and how that might look. And um
You gotta go. You gotta go in with the right mindset. Like I remember setting up one of my first grows that was like in an industrial space and like making a real lease and things, and like like going to the city for a building permit on something, and then they're coming back and asking me something. And I go to my dad. I'm like, "Oh, Dad, jigs up. They asked me for this. They asked me for this site plan. Like they know what I'm doing." And he's like, "Just give them the site plan." And you give them the site plan, and it works. And like it's just like you got to go in with the right mindset, and then hopefully good things happen. But I mean, they know you now, so that conversation is going to be that much easier next time.
Yeah, and we'll see how it all comes together as our state evolves with legalization.
You never know what's going to happen. Like you could like literally save the like mayor of the township's daughter while she's crossing the street like tomorrow. And he'd be like, what do you want? Anything. And you'd be like, I just want to run a small micro business on my property. And he'd be like, done.
Yeah, or like maybe someone has an ailment that they've been interested in cannabis but didn't have a source, or I don't know. You never know. Like RSO has been a really interesting way to connect with people who have legitimate things going on. Not that the people who smoke flower or rosin or melt aren't, but you just deal with a different set of people who are interested in buying RSO or interested in the topical market. So those have been some really great experiences and feedback from folks who you're really giving medicine to on a whole nother level. So, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see where this whole working with city council gets me. Maybe one day I'll get that opportunity.
I'm excited, man. That's awesome. I wanted to ask you one more thing about your trip to California. Like, were there any specific profiles that jumped out at you as a maker that really surprised you or stood out that come to mind?
So there was a lot of great flower at that hive gathering. Like you're around some of the best regenerative farmers in the nation. If not, there's tons of California people. Like anyone who was in the Mendo Humboldt area, like it was easy for them to come up. So I got to try some lemon head from Daniel. What was his name? What was his farm's name? Mother Rock? But no, that's not right. I'm drawing a blank. Oh man, I feel bad that I can't give him the credit. It wasn't Lemonhead from Archive though. It was his Lemonhead, and it was based off the structure, not the smell. It had like, if I remember correctly, it was a little piney, and no, I don't remember the profile too well. I know I loved it, and when I popped open, Lacey's not a huge flower person, and she's like, "Wow, that's some really good shit. You need to get those seeds and be growing that stuff." And then Joey Berger had this like something blueberry, and it was like, for me, I got this citrusy blueberry profile and I loved it. I took a couple nugs with me and just like stuffed them in my pockets, and then it was kind of just a share style, so take what you want, and this is to share. So I brought it with me to show Casey when I picked him up from the airport, and I had this jacket on. Every time I moved, it'd like waft to smell this nug in my nose. Like, this is fucking great. I need it like cologne or like some smell to just have this. But the bud looked atrocious by the end of the trip because it was sitting in my pocket. And I'm just like moving around, driving and shit. And it looked like brickweed from the 90s. And that's not talking crap at all on Joey's growing, it was just because I just kept smashing it and it was in the wrong pocket. But those are probably the two flowers that stuck out. A lot of guys at Ego Clash had some phenomenal stuff. I had never ran into Mile High Melts, and his stuff was like on another fucking level. Man, there's so much good hash there. I got to hang out with some folks after the event from a Patreon group, and got to see Adam's jar. I got to see Adam as in Simply Adam, and then I got to see Justin from Symbiotic. maybe it's Symbiosis. I'm sorry if I'm fucking this up when he's seeing it. But I got to see his. I got to see Alex from Solventless Refinery stuff. I got to see Tom's. Um, his freebooter smelled crazy. I think it was a strawberry guava cross. That's from Tom. And then the Justin sent me home with all these amazing like single gram pucks of like the Fruity Pebble OG, which he gifted me seeds that him and his buddy did a cross using a creme de grapaya male for my stuff. So we're growing that now. Very small plants and veg. His red pop. Oh man, there was so much good shit there. I'm sure I'm missing a ton of it. Adam from Mission Hill Melts got to show me his 710 labs stash that he brought back after visiting them at the headquarters, and unfortunately, his stash got misplaced at the event, and someone went home with some killer stuff. But everything he was showing me from that case was amazing. So there's too much good hash from that trip, and to name. I Alice and Flynn were at the Hive Gathering. Gil from Icewook and Amanda from Yashi Melts, I think is her current name. Yep. They were all at the Hive Gathering and busting out their stuff before the event. Not that I got to smell exactly what they submitted because most of us were competing against each other, but there was so much good shit. It was wild.
Yeah, it was special. I mean, that's very cool. So I mean, what's up for Terpwizard this year? Like, what are you focused on coming into 2023?
So I felt like we hunted a lot of fruit this last year. Looking back at photos, I believe we had our first round of flower in May, and I had sorted through my seed fridges recently and separate everything and did it into like the basic 5 categories that Kevin Jodry does. Like if I remember correctly, it's
fuel, floral, earth.
Yeah, and then I think he has citrus in there too, or like I don't remember exactly, but I broke it into like citrus, floral, earthy, fruity, and gas.
Yeah.
I mean, there's subcategories of everything.
Oh, yeah, no,
but that's how I divide it. And the 2 biggest boxes I had was fruity and gas. And I was like, shit, I dived a lot into fruit this year. So let's go into gas going next year. The reason behind doing fruit heavy this year is that's kind of what I was leaning towards, liking and smell, and felt like our market had a lot of gas, and I kind of wanted to veer away from that and set myself apart and see if I could find some profiles that I'm not seeing a lot on the market or available. And, going to more events this year than I have in the past, I'm seeing a lot more people have fruit now. So I'm like, all right, let's go back to gas and kind of try to explore those subcategories. Like I want to get, obviously we're hunting sour, but I'm looking for some more chemically stuff, like some astringency, some cheese. I'm going to hunt a little earth this year. I don't feel like that's something that a lot of people look for. It has to be really well done. Like just check all the boxes for people. And it's I don't know. I don't really have people searching that out on my end, but there is one strain in particular that we're running that checks the box for that now. And I'm trying to find something, maybe replace it or go deeper into that pack and see if I find a better representation. But it's mint coffee from Kaya, and that has some like earthy funkiness. And I almost got rid of the plant because no one was really giving me great feedback on it. And then the last 2 times it's gone out, I've just been like getting an insane feedback from people on there. Like, oh man, this shit's killer. I had a buddy who opened up the jar, and the other friend was like, what the fuck was that? It smelled amazing, stunk up the whole car. And, people were just giving me some great reviews on that. And to, kind of have that yin to the yang, you throw in some earth or some gas and then have fruit. It's good to be able to have something a little different to keep your body guessing.
100%. It's good to have it. I think that every good grower kind of dreams of having that full stable of, a standout in every one of those categories to be able to, show up to the gathering to, or whatever that, whatever group that they want to get validation from. But
yeah,
I wanted to ask you, you've had a ton of achievements in the last few years. What would you say would be, your proudest achievement in cannabis in the last 5 years? Like, you've done quite a bit. What would you put the top at?
well, I think for me, an obvious one is the DEM certification, because it's not something that happens overnight. You work towards it for a very long time, and at the shortest amount of time you get is a year, which is a good amount of time for people to put into it. But from the time I found out about them to the time we got certified was probably somewhere in the 3-year mark. So, 3 years of working towards that, that's like getting a degree in some sense. Like, people go to school for about that amount of time. That'd be really hustling to get in 3 years, but, most people do it in 4, some people do it longer. But, and then next for us would be, getting the invite for the ego class. Just the invite alone to me was a win. And that's how we went into it. Is like, we've already won something in our heart just by being here. Because, hearing about that the first year or two I was out here, I was like, oh man, I'd love to go. And then I want to say Brandon came out here to this spot called Vehicle City Social in Flint. It was like a little caregiver club where you can go and present your card and then have a table. And he came out with Landrace Indian out here and sold some stuff. And I had this strain at the moment called Strawberry Pie, and it was like strawberry candy forward and cheese in the back. And I showed him it, and it was like, what do you think, man? Would I be able to compete with something like this? It's like, you're getting there. And I was like, all right, at least I'm pointed in the right direction. So to be able to 2 years later get invited from him, and the story behind that was really something special in itself. For who I got vouched for me was a huge compliment. I met Cuban at the Smoking Jacket. I've had no excuse to run into him ever before, and that was the one time I got to say hey. And for me, I like to, when I meet someone that I respect, I like to bring them something to show my appreciation, but also maybe have them remember me, right? So like, I'm, as a beekeeper, I have honey, and I make seeds, and obviously we all make hash. So getting some hash is great, but I'm sure you got a lot of hash at that event. But I talked to him before, and I was like, hey, are you into hot sauce? He's like, nah, I don't really, that's not my thing. It's like, well, how about honey? He's like, so then I start talking about honey, and I didn't realize this, but Cuban's like really into fucking honey. Like, that guy gets into shit. And he's like, oh yeah, I like trying all these different honeys in my town. And he's got like his honey plugs. I'm like, oh fuck, okay, cool. Like, I can talk to him. So I brought him a nice big jar of honey, and then, maybe talked to him once or twice. And then like the week before, maybe a couple days before we leave, I post a picture of some melt we did with rainbow belts. And it was probably some of the best stuff we made, right? And it greased up perfectly in the jar, showed the before and after, and he's like, that looks really fucking good, man. I was like, well, coming from you, that I couldn't ask for a better compliment. And he was nice enough to kind of vouch for us, and I think ultimately that's why we got to go. I didn't ask him to do it. He said, I know you're doing killer stuff, I respect what you're doing, and I hope he's okay with me sharing that story. But yeah, he vouched for us, and that's, I think, what ultimately made the difference. But to go back to the other thing, if I had to do top 3, the other achievement in cannabis space would be, to know when to pull back and also to go forward. The stepping back and staying small and not getting beyond my means, and really evaluating what I wanted for my long-term goals. And it's not always easy to do that in the moment and think about how this is all going to play out. Sometimes just you got this engine in motion, right? And you're feeding coal into it and you're going and you're on this track, right? You're not maybe thinking about what's ahead. You're just like, let's just keep going full blast ahead. And for me, that project was kind of like that, right? I didn't really think about where I'd ultimately be. I was like, oh, I'm be working with the plants, like eventually going to transition to this. But I think in reality, once I had a moment thing is like, nah, dude, you care the most out of all these people. You're going to be the guy inputting numbers and making sure you're compliant and being worried every day that these guys might be doing something stupid to put your license in jeopardy, because I was the one with that was the license holder. I had everything in line for me to get that at that time. So yeah, it was. I'd say those three things are what come to mind first. I'm sure there's some other stuff if I prepared a little better that I could think of, but those are some.
Oh man, that's great. Other than everybody or the people that we've touched on so far, is there anybody else that you want to give a shout out to, or props? This is your kind of opportunity to shout those people out.
Oh man. First off, let me say sorry if I miss anyone. That has been a crucial part to me getting here. Let me try to think about this from the beginning, right? Like from the start of my journey to now. First off, I got to shout out Nicotine, right? Because he was one of the first companies that I got to try melt and ultimately inspired me in a roundabout way to be here. Because he offered stuff at the store that I could get that was of such high quality, it inspired me that I can do this myself. I got to shout out him. Any of the guys who I worked with in the past, I don't want to directly name because I don't know where they're at, essentially. I really appreciate anyone who I've worked with that, has been a mentor. Let's go back to Chandler, Jet House, and Nick Risden from Lime Rising. Like, I need to shout out those guys for sure. They were a huge part of me getting certified. I got to shout out my guys who work with me. I know this is going to be a little bit of a long one, but I'm trying to make sure I cover all my bases. But Casey, Hunter, and Mitchell, those guys work extremely hard with me to make the dream that I want to see this brand, persona, Instagram name, however you want to put it. They help me get to where I want to be. They help me transform these thoughts I have in my mind to become reality. So I gotta for sure give a huge shout out to them. I definitely need to say something to thank my partner too for putting up with all my bullshit and keeping me level headed. She works as a psychiatrist, and her hard days are much different than mine, and she really keeps me in check for a better life balance, and maybe to realize the things in the garden maybe aren't as bad as you think they are, because there's people really dealing with some stuff and having some hard days, and she's got to help them wrap their head around those and get to a much better space. Um, my parents being so supportive, man, I'm sure there's so many others.
Bro, you've done a killer job. Probably the best to date on the show. Just being
well, that's flattering. I mean, I know, like I said, I know I could go on and on, but like those are the few. Once again, sorry to anyone who I didn't mention. I got a lot of friends who've been great inspiration too. Adam and Hannah from Mission Hill Melts, they've been really nice about giving me ideas of how to progress as we transition from, getting these different stages in where Terpwizard is at the moment. Simply Adam, he's helped me get better at melt Making Melt and Tom from Humphrey Hashish, and a couple of the local guys, Organi Melts, Chase. Chase helped me build out my new space. I don't know if he's talked about that at all, but he essentially was the contractor. So I literally wouldn't have this grow without him.
That's cool.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I said, I could keep going, but we'll stop with the thank yous there. I'm definitely very grateful for anyone who's helped me along the way, and I hope that's been conveyed to them.
You're a genuine and good person, and I think that comes off very quickly when anybody has the opportunity to meet you, Connor. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they watch the show, they want to reach out to you for whatever reason? How do they get in touch with you?
Instagram obviously works. My tag's on here at Terp_Wizard in case anyone's listening and can't see it, or I'm sure they can see it in the title. But we're about to launch a website in the next week. So I think there's going to be a couple ways to contact us on there. It's going to be our DEM certification name. So I process and grow indoors under Terpwizard. We're going to process our outdoors under Terpwizard, but our homestead name is Plant Magic Homestead. So the website will be there. If you want to figure it out, eventually be in the bio on our Instagram, and I'll make a post about it. But keep an eye out for that one, and we'll be releasing the new blueberry watermelon melon bread line on there, and a couple of the oldies. I think I saved a few where I can re-release some things, and but yeah, those would be the probably two best ways, unless we're at an event. Just come by and say, hey, I'd love to talk to anyone.
That's so awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate you coming on the show. Yeah, man, it was really cool getting to chop it up and hear your story.
Yeah, thanks again for having me on, man. I really appreciate the opportunity to share my stories, and I hope some folks took some value from this, maybe learned a couple things, or if nothing else, got to know me a little better. So thanks again, dude. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on your platform.
No worries, brother. Hope everybody enjoyed. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Moth tickets on sale, January 20th. Let's go. Cheers, everyone.